Hello, you're watching Euronews now. Let's take a look at the latest headlines. European leaders scramble to contain the record-breaking spread of the Omicron variant as the World Health Organization declares an 11% weekly increase in global COVID cases. Russia doubles down on dissolving its iconic NGO Memorial by ordering the closure of its Human Rights Center. And a discovery that was 3,500 years in the making. We talked to the scientist who came face to face with an Egyptian pharaoh with the help of some digital technology.
France has reported a record number of new COVID-19 cases in a 24-hour period, almost 180,000, the highest ever number in Europe. New measures are scheduled to come into effect next week, including capacity limits on big events and requiring seating at concerts and in bars. However, no drastic restrictions were imposed before New Year's Eve.
No single measures will resolve this issue. We are facing the unknown with these variants, and I think that the government is trying to do its best while it is also trying to preserve individual liberties.
Greece also registered a record number of cases, soaring to over 21,000, the first time it's been a 5-digit number. The regions of Attica and Thessaloniki were particularly badly hit. Portugal had a similar story, but the number of hospitalizations, like in other European countries, remains comparatively low. About 87% of its population have been vaccinated, which is one of the world's highest rates. Meanwhile, Poland is bucking the trend. Cases there have recently fallen by 30%, and therefore no further restrictions are in the pipeline.
Today we can see that despite the growing risk of infection with the Omicron variant, the number of new cases in Poland hasn't started to increase after Christmas. So for today, I emphasize, for today we do not plan to introduce new COVID restrictions this week.
And in Belgium, the highest administrative court cancelled a move to close entertainment venues, saying the government hadn't presented enough evidence.
Anger and dismay. That has been the reaction to many Russians to Moscow City's court decision to shut down a second prominent human rights group in the space of just 48 hours. Outside the court, there was outrage to the verdict, many seeing this as a dark mark on Russian civil society.
We've been saying from the start that the foreign agent law, and I'm doing the air quotations again, is not lawful, and it's not to be amended, but only abolished, because it was designed with the aim of strangling civil society. Today we received another proof of that. The court essentially validated our efforts today.
Moscow's decision has not gone unnoticed. UK Foreign Secretary Liz Truss tweeted her disdain of the verdict, calling it a chilling blow to freedom of expression in Russia. That frustration was echoed in Germany, who strongly condemned Russia's actions.
The decision of the Supreme Court to dissolve the non-governmental organization Memorial is more than incomprehensible and contradicts international obligations to protect fundamental civil rights, which Russia has also entered into. Memorial is an expression of our common European self-image to clearly name and process violations of human rights.
Memorial and its sister group, the Memorial Human Rights Center, which was shut today, drew international acclaim for its studies of human rights abuses during the Soviet Union.
As Joe Biden enjoys time with his family, the prospect of war may seem a million miles away. The US leader said he'll talk to his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin this week and isn't ruling out a meeting in person on January the 10th when talks are planned between the two powers. At the UN, Russia's deputy envoy emphasized the importance of the meeting.
I don't think that our colleagues will get away with some blah 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 thing, as Greta Thunberg puts it. So we really want something serious this time. It's not an ultimatum. It was also underlined several times by my foreign minister and my president. It's a constructive proposal, but it's the proposal that works for everybody and that is in the interest of everybody.
Tensions have been constantly rising between the powers. This week, Russia held military drills on its western border, where a massive troop build-up has led to concerns that Mr. Putin plans to invade Ukraine. While Moscow denies this, it says that it will have to take adequate military technical measures if the West continues its aggressive course on the threshold of our home. All eyes are now set for the meeting on January the 10th.
As we've been hearing, US President Joe Biden is set to meet with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin next month over Moscow's ongoing tensions with Ukraine. Meanwhile, President Putin has also been holding talks with the Belarusian President Lukashenko, who increasingly relies on the Kremlin for his political survival. Ukraine remains vulnerable to an invasion from 100,000 Russian troops currently amassed on its border. Well, to discuss this further, I'm now joined by Peter Dickinson in Kiev. He is the Ukraine editor for the Atlantic Council. Thank you for joining us. So there's a lot of talking going on, and what does it all mean, and what's the mood like?
Well, the mood in Kiev actually is quite festive but cautious. People are getting on with the Christmas holidays, and there's a wonderful seasonal holiday mood around the city of Kiev. But, of course, there is huge anxiety that I think is in the back of a lot of people's minds about this very large invasion force and the alarming rhetoric that's coming out of the Kremlin. So there'll be a lot of people in Ukraine watching today's meeting between Lukashenko and Putin in Russia as another sign of the strengthening ties between Belarus and Russia and the dependency, as you mentioned, of Lukashenko on Putin, which effectively is transforming Belarus into an extension of Russia, which for Ukraine in a military sense has huge implications because the countries share a 1,000-kilometer border to the north of Ukraine. Now, Russian troops based in Belarus would considerably expand the encirclement of Ukraine.
And what about the talks with Biden? How are they being perceived?
People in Ukraine, of course, are concerned primarily that Ukraine could become a sacrificial lamb or could be sacrificed in some form to become a geopolitical pawn in talks between Russia and America. There is what we could probably call a Munich syndrome, the sense that Ukraine could be betrayed in some sort of grand deal, and there is a strong awareness that Russia seeks such a deal. At the moment, the signs coming out of America is America will be resistant to that, will not force Ukraine into any compromises that Kiev is unwilling to make itself. But of course, there is past precedent for this, and the general response to Russia's aggressive tone and the 8-year conflict, which is ongoing, the simmering conflict in the east of Ukraine, does not inspire confidence in Ukraine. So, of course, people are hopeful that these talks will help resolve or turn down the current tensions, but there is anxiety. They fear that Ukraine could somehow end up coming out of this as the loser. And there's always been a mantra in Kiev: nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. That was very much the case throughout the Poroshenko presidency. Volodymyr Zelensky, the current president, has tried to maintain this, but it's actually, there is a sense that he's losing ground in this direction, that there are increasingly talks taking place about Ukraine without Ukraine. And that, of course, is feeding these fears, these fears of a Munich 38 scenario in which Ukraine is presented with a fait accompli and told basically, well, this is the reality. We are not going to, the West will not support you anymore. You have to make your terms or accept the terms that we have agreed with Russia over your heads. So this is a constant fear in Ukraine. And at the moment, I think probably that fear is heightened given the nature of the Russian rhetoric and given the initial response from the Western powers. So there'll be a lot of concern in the coming weeks as we lead up to these talks in January.
Peter Dickinson, thank you very much for speaking to Euronews. You're watching Euronews now. We'll be back with more in just a moment.